The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Avenue as Marcus Williams walked to school, his worn sneakers making soft sounds on the sidewalk. At 14 years old, Marcus had learned to navigate the wealthy neighborhood carefully. His mother worked as a cleaner in one of the big houses, and sometimes he would walk with her to help carry her supplies. Today was different. As Marcus turned the corner near Elmwood Drive, he heard a woman's desperate cries coming from inside a black luxury car parked at an odd angle near the curb. The driver's door was wide open and steam was rising from the hood. Through the passenger window, he could see a woman with blonde hair clutching her stomach, her face twisted in pain. Marcus didn't hesitate. He ran toward the car, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Inside, he found a woman who looked to be in her 30s, wearing expensive clothes and jewelry that sparkled even in the dim light of the car's interior. She was pregnant and clearly in serious distress. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The woman looked up at him with tear-filled blue eyes. "The baby," she gasped between heavy breaths. "Something's wrong. My husband's phone. It's dead. The car broke down and I can't." Marcus quickly assessed the situation. The woman's breathing was labored, and she was pale. He had seen enough medical shows with his grandmother to know this wasn't normal pregnancy discomfort. "This was an emergency. My name is Marcus," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm going to help you. Do you have your phone?" She pointed weakly to a designer purse that had fallen to the floor. Marcus retrieved it and found her phone, but the screen was cracked and wouldn't respond to touch. He pulled out his own simple flip phone, the one his mother had given him for emergencies. "What's your name?" he asked while dialing 911. "Victoria," she whispered. "Victoria Hartwell." The name sounded familiar, but Marcus focused on the emergency operator who had just answered his call. He gave their location clearly, explained the situation, and described Victoria's symptoms. The operator told him an ambulance was on the way and began giving him instructions on how to help. Marcus took off his jacket and folded it to make Victoria more comfortable. He found a bottle of water in the car and helped her take small sips. All the while, he kept talking to her, asking about her baby, when she was due, anything to keep her conscious and calm. "Why are you helping me?" Victoria asked weakly, studying Marcus's face. Her question caught him off guard. "Because you need help," he replied simply. "That's what people do for each other." Victoria's expression shifted, and for a moment something like shame crossed her features. Marcus didn't understand why, but he could see she was struggling with more than just physical pain. As they waited for the ambulance, Victoria's contractions became more intense. Marcus had learned about childbirth emergencies in his health class, and he was worried the baby might come before help arrived. He stayed calm, following the emergency operator's instructions, and kept Victoria focused on breathing. "Tell me about your family," Marcus said, trying to distract her from the pain. "My husband, Charles," she managed between breaths. "He's at work. Doesn't know about this. We'll call him as soon as we can," Marcus assured her. "What about the baby? Do you know if it's a boy or girl?" A small smile crossed Victoria's lips despite her pain. "A boy," she said. "We're going to name him James after my father." The sound of sirens grew louder, and Marcus felt relief wash over him. He had done everything he could, and help was finally arriving. As the paramedics rushed toward them with their equipment, Marcus stepped back to give them space. "Wait," Victoria called out, reaching for his hand. "Don't leave, please." Marcus looked at the paramedics, who nodded their approval. He climbed into the ambulance with Victoria, holding her hand as they rushed toward Mercy General Hospital. During the ride, Victoria's grip on his hand was strong, and Marcus could see gratitude in her eyes that went beyond words. At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Victoria was rushed into the emergency room while Marcus waited in the lobby, still wearing his school backpack. A nurse brought him a cup of hot chocolate and asked for his contact information so they could call his mother. When his mother, Linda Williams, arrived an hour later, her face was filled with worry and confusion. She worked long hours cleaning houses and offices, and getting an emergency call about her son at a hospital had terrified her. "Marcus, what happened?" she asked, pulling him into a tight hug. Marcus explained everything while they sat in the uncomfortable hospital chairs. Linda listened with growing amazement and pride. She had raised her son to be kind and helpful, but she was impressed by his maturity and quick thinking in such a serious situation. A doctor approached them around noon. "Are you the young man who helped Mrs. Hartwell?" he asked Marcus. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, standing up politely. "She's going to be fine," the doctor said with a smile. "And so is the baby. You did exactly the right thing. Your quick action and calm presence probably saved both their lives." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and pride. He had helped someone in need, and it had made a real difference. His mother squeezed his shoulder, her eyes shining with tears of joy and pride. "Can we see her?" Linda asked the doctor. "She's resting now, but she specifically asked to see Marcus when she wakes up. She wants to thank him properly." As they waited, Marcus thought about Victoria's question in the car. Why had she asked why he was helping her? It seemed like such an obvious thing to do. When someone needed help, you helped them. That was how his mother had raised him, and it was what felt right in his heart. Little did Marcus know that his simple act of kindness was about to change not just Victoria's life, but his own in ways he could never have imagined. 2 hours later, Marcus and his mother were still in the hospital waiting room when they heard quick footsteps echoing through the hallway. A tall man in an expensive suit rushed past them toward the nurse's station. His hair was perfectly styled, his watch gleamed gold, and everything about him spoke of wealth and power. Marcus recognized him from newspapers and local TV. Charles Hartwell, owner of Hartwell Industries and one of the richest men in the city. "Where is my wife?" Charles demanded at the desk, his voice loud and commanding. "Victoria Hartwell. I got a call about an emergency." The nurse calmly directed him to Victoria's room. As he hurried past Marcus and Linda again, he didn't even glance in their direction. They were invisible to him, just 2 more people in a hospital waiting room. About 30 minutes later, Charles emerged from Victoria's room, his face a mixture of relief and confusion. He approached the nurse's station again, and Marcus could hear parts of their conversation. "My wife keeps talking about a boy who helped her," Charles was saying. "Some teenager. She wants to see him, but I don't understand why. We need to focus on her recovery, not entertain random people." The nurse looked toward Marcus and Linda. "That would be the young man over there," she said, pointing. "Marcus Williams. According to our paramedics, he likely saved your wife's life." Charles turned to look at Marcus for the first time. His eyes took in the boy's simple clothes, his old sneakers, and his worn backpack. Marcus stood up politely when he realized Charles was studying him. "You're the one who helped Victoria?" Charles asked, walking over to them. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, extending his hand for a handshake. "I'm Marcus Williams, and this is my mother, Linda Williams." Charles looked at Marcus's outstretched hand for a moment before shaking it briefly. "I appreciate what you did," he said in a tone that sounded more like he was discussing a business transaction than thanking someone who saved his family. "I'd like to offer you a reward. Would $500 be sufficient?" The suggestion hung in the air awkwardly. Linda Williams straightened up, her dignity evident despite her simple work uniform. "That's very generous, Mr. Hartwell," she said carefully. "But Marcus didn't help your wife for money. He did it because it was the right thing to do." Charles looked surprised, as if he couldn't understand why anyone would refuse money. "Well then, what do you want?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Nothing, sir," Marcus said honestly. "I just hope Mrs. Hartwell and the baby are okay. That's all I care about." Before Charles could respond, a nurse approached them. "Mrs. Hartwell is awake and asking for Marcus. She's quite insistent about seeing him." Charles frowned. "She needs to rest." "This is unnecessary, sir," the nurse said gently but firmly. "Your wife has been through a traumatic experience. If seeing this young man will help her feel better, it might actually aid in her recovery." Reluctantly, Charles led Marcus and Linda to Victoria's room. Victoria was sitting up in bed, looking much better than she had in the car. Her color had returned, and she was holding a small bundle, baby James, who had been born healthy despite the emergency. When Victoria saw Marcus, her face lit up with genuine joy. "Marcus," she said, her voice stronger now. "Come here, please." Marcus approached the bed shyly, with his mother close behind. Victoria reached out and took both of his hands in hers. "I can never thank you enough," Victoria said, tears rolling down her cheeks. "The doctors told me what could have happened if you hadn't been there. You saved our lives." Marcus felt embarrassed by all the attention. "I'm just glad you're both okay, ma'am." "He's beautiful," he added, looking at baby James. "Would you like to hold him?" Victoria asked. Charles stepped forward quickly. Victoria, I don't think that's… Charles, Victoria interrupted, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. This boy risked everything to help us. The least we can do is let him meet James properly. Victoria carefully placed baby James in Marcus's arms. The infant was tiny and warm, and Marcus held him with the same gentle care he had shown Victoria in the car. Baby James opened his eyes and seemed to look directly at Marcus, making soft baby sounds. He likes you, Victoria said softly, watching the interaction with wonder. As Marcus held the baby, he thought about his own life. He had never been around newborns much, but there was something special about this moment. This little boy would grow up with every advantage: the best schools, the finest clothes, unlimited opportunities. Marcus hoped James would also grow up to be kind and caring, regardless of his family's wealth. How old are you, Marcus? Victoria asked. 14, ma'am. I'll be 15 next month. Victoria looked at her husband meaningfully. Charles, he's just a child himself, and yet he acted with such courage and maturity. Don't you think that's remarkable? Charles was studying Marcus more carefully now, perhaps really seeing him for the first time. Where do you go to school, Marcus? Washington Middle School, sir. It's about 2 miles from where I found Mrs. Hartwell. And what were you doing in our neighborhood? I was walking to school. My mom sometimes works in the houses over there, cleaning, Marcus answered honestly without any shame. Charles glanced at Linda, taking in her work uniform properly for the first time. Something shifted in his expression, though Marcus couldn't tell if it was understanding or something else. What do you want to be when you grow up? Victoria asked Marcus, genuinely interested. I'd like to be a doctor, Marcus said. I want to help people like the doctors here helped you today. Victoria smiled warmly. That's a wonderful dream. What's your favorite subject in school? Science and math. I get good grades, mostly A's and B's. My mom says education is the most important thing. Linda nodded proudly. Marcus works very hard in school. He studies every night after I get home from work. Victoria looked at Charles again, and Marcus could sense some kind of silent communication between them. Charles still seemed uncomfortable with the situation, but Victoria was clearly moved by Marcus's story. Marcus, Victoria said, I want you to know that what you did today will never be forgotten. You didn't just save our lives. You showed us something about courage and kindness that I hope I never forget. A nurse came in to check on Victoria and the baby, indicating that visiting time should end soon. Marcus carefully handed baby James back to Victoria. Thank you for letting me meet him properly, Marcus said. I hope you all stay healthy and happy. As Marcus and his mother prepared to leave, Victoria called out one more time. Marcus, would it be okay if I stayed in touch? I'd like to know how you're doing in school. Marcus looked at his mother, who nodded approval. Sure, Mrs. Hartwell, that would be nice. Charles remained quiet during this exchange, but Marcus noticed he was watching everything very carefully, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't quite understand. As they left the hospital, Marcus felt good about helping Victoria and meeting baby James. He had no idea that this encounter would soon turn his life upside down in ways he never could have imagined. 3 days after the hospital encounter, Charles Hartwell sat in his executive office on the 42nd floor of the Hartwell Tower, staring out at the city skyline. He couldn't stop thinking about the boy who had saved Victoria and James. Something about the interaction bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Victoria had come home from the hospital with baby James, and she wouldn't stop talking about Marcus. She had even asked Charles to find out more about the boy's family, suggesting they might be able to help somehow. Charles had agreed, mainly to appease his wife, but now he found himself genuinely curious. He picked up his phone and called David Mitchell, the private investigator his company sometimes used for background checks on potential business partners. David, I need you to look into someone for me. 14-year-old boy named Marcus Williams. What kind of information are you looking for, Mr. Hartwell? David asked. Everything. Family background, school records, living situation. I want to understand who this kid really is. 2 days later, David's report arrived on Charles's desk. As he read through it, Charles felt his understanding of the world shift in ways he hadn't expected. Marcus Williams lived with his mother, Linda Williams, in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the Riverside Gardens complex. Linda had been working 3 jobs to support them since Marcus's father died in a construction accident when Marcus was 8 years old. She cleaned houses during the day, worked at a grocery store 3 evenings a week, and did laundry for elderly neighbors on weekends. Despite their financial struggles, Marcus was an exceptional student. He maintained a 3.8 GPA while also working part-time jobs to help his mother. He delivered newspapers in the early morning before school and helped at Mrs. Chen's corner store after classes. Every penny he earned went toward household expenses and saving for college. The report included copies of Marcus's school records and teacher recommendations. His science teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had written, "Marcus Williams is one of the most dedicated students I have ever taught. Despite facing significant challenges at home, he never misses assignments and often helps other students with their work. He has natural leadership abilities and genuine compassion for others." His math teacher had noted, "Marcus has exceptional analytical skills and could easily succeed in advanced mathematics or science courses if given the opportunity. He often asks about college requirements and scholarship opportunities." Charles learned that Marcus volunteered at the local community center, teaching younger kids basic reading skills. He had also organized a food drive at his school last year that collected over 500 cans for the local food bank. The most surprising information came from Marcus's guidance counselor, Mr. Rodriguez. The report quoted him saying, "Marcus Williams is possibly the most mature and responsible teenager I have encountered in 20 years of education. He faces adult-level responsibilities at home but never uses them as excuses. He dreams of becoming a doctor to help people, and I have no doubt he could achieve this goal with the right opportunities." What struck Charles most was a note about Marcus's father. Robert Williams had been working on a construction project for one of Charles's subsidiary companies when the accident occurred. The family had received a small settlement, but it had barely covered funeral costs and medical bills from Robert's brief hospital stay. Charles set down the report and walked to his window. He thought about his own teenage years, private schools, summer camps, tutors for every subject, never worrying about money or basic necessities. Marcus, at 14, was already more responsible and hardworking than most adults Charles knew. That evening, Charles shared the report with Victoria as she nursed baby James. She listened quietly, occasionally wiping tears from her eyes. "Charles," she said when he finished, "do you realize what this means? This boy, who has every reason to be bitter about life, who has so little, still didn't hesitate to help a stranger, and not just any stranger, someone from the world that probably seems impossible for him to reach." "I understand that, Victoria. It's admirable." "No, you don't understand," Victoria said, shifting James to her shoulder. "When I was in that car, scared and in pain, I looked at Marcus and my first thought wasn't gratitude. My first thought was fear. I was afraid of him because of how he looked, because of where we were, because of prejudices I didn't even know I had." Charles felt uncomfortable. "Victoria, you were in medical distress. You weren't thinking clearly." "I was thinking clearly enough to be ashamed of my reaction," Victoria replied firmly. "This boy saw a person in trouble and helped, period. I saw a black teenager and felt afraid even when he was saving my life." "What does that say about me? About us?" The conversation continued late into the night. Victoria told Charles details from the car ride that she hadn't shared before. How calm Marcus had been, how he had kept her talking and focused, how he had treated her with such gentle respect despite her initial reaction to him. "He called me ma'am the whole time," Victoria said, "even when I was basically a stranger who had looked at him with suspicion. He showed me more kindness and respect than I deserved." The next morning, Charles made an unexpected decision. Instead of sending his driver, he got in his own car and drove to Washington Middle School. He wanted to see Marcus in his normal environment, to understand more about the boy who had affected his family so profoundly. He arrived during lunch period and found Marcus in the school cafeteria. The boy was sitting with a diverse group of friends, helping a younger student with what appeared to be math homework. Marcus was patient and encouraging, explaining concepts until the younger boy understood. Charles watched from a distance as Marcus shared his lunch with another student who apparently had forgotten his money. It was a simple gesture, done without fanfare or expectation of recognition. After lunch, Charles followed Marcus to his locker, where several students approached him for various reasons. One needed help understanding a history assignment. Another wanted advice about dealing with bullies. A girl asked if Marcus could tutor her younger brother in reading. Each time, Marcus listened carefully and offered help or encouragement. Charles realized he was seeing natural leadership in action. Marcus wasn't just academically gifted. He was someone other students trusted and turned to for help. He had the respect of his peers and teachers, not because of money or status, but because of his character. When the final bell rang, Charles watched Marcus gather his books and head for the exit. Instead of going home to rest after a full day of school, Marcus walked 6 blocks to Mrs. Chen's corner store, where he worked until evening. As Charles drove home to his mansion, he thought about the contrast between Marcus's life and his own son's future. Baby James would grow up with every privilege, every advantage, but would he ever develop the strength, compassion, and maturity that Marcus had shown at 14? That night, Charles made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. He was going to find a way to help Marcus, not out of obligation or guilt, but because he was beginning to understand that Marcus represented something important, something that his own privileged world often lacked. Victoria was right. Marcus hadn't just saved their lives in that car. He had opened their eyes to a different way of seeing the world, and Charles was finally ready to learn what that meant. Charles Hartwell had built his fortune by making quick, decisive business decisions. But sitting in his home office a week after visiting Marcus's school, he found himself paralyzed by uncertainty. How do you thank someone who saved your family? More importantly, how do you help someone without insulting their dignity or changing who they are? His first instinct had been simple: write a check, set up a college fund, pay off Linda Williams's debts, solve their problems with money. But something about his brief interaction with Marcus and Linda told him this approach would backfire. They had already declined his reward offer at the hospital. They had pride, dignity, and values that couldn't be bought. Victoria found him staring at his computer screen, a blank email open in front of him. Baby James was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "What are you trying to write?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I want to help Marcus and his mother, but I don't know how. Everything I think of feels wrong somehow." Victoria smiled knowingly. "You're trying to solve this like a business problem, aren't you? Figure out what they need, throw money at it, move on to the next issue." Charles nodded, feeling somewhat embarrassed. "That's how I solve most problems. But this isn't a problem to be solved, Charles. It's a relationship to be built. Marcus didn't save our lives so we could fix his life. He saved us because that's who he is. Then what do I do? Pretend it never happened? Send a thank you card?" Victoria shifted James to her shoulder and thought for a moment. "Why don't you start by getting to know them? Really know them. Not through investigation reports, but through actual conversation." The suggestion made Charles nervous. He was comfortable in boardrooms, at charity galas, and country clubs, but having a genuine conversation with a 14-year-old boy and his mother felt more challenging than negotiating million-dollar deals. "What would we even talk about?" he asked. "The same things you'd talk about with anyone else. Their interests, their dreams, their experiences. Marcus wants to be a doctor. When was the last time you talked to someone about their dreams instead of their stock portfolios?" That weekend, Charles did something unprecedented. He asked Victoria to invite Marcus and Linda to their home for Sunday dinner. Not for a formal thank you event, but for a simple meal and conversation. Linda was hesitant when Victoria called. "Mrs. Hartwell, that's very kind of you, but we don't want to impose." "Please," Victoria said warmly. "James keeps asking for Marcus." It was a small exaggeration. Baby James was only a week old, but Victoria could sense Linda needed a reason that felt comfortable. When Sunday arrived, Charles found himself more nervous than before any business presentation he'd ever given. He changed clothes 3 times, unsure what would be appropriate. Victoria laughed at his anxiety. "Just be yourself," she advised. "What if myself isn't good enough?" Charles asked, voicing a fear he'd never admitted before. When Marcus and Linda arrived, they brought homemade rolls that Linda had baked that morning. The gesture touched Victoria deeply. Despite having little money, they had found a way to contribute to the meal. Charles watched as Marcus immediately gravitated toward baby James, asking thoughtful questions about newborn care and development. The boy's genuine interest and gentle manner with the baby impressed Charles. Most adults were awkward around newborns, but Marcus seemed natural and comfortable. During dinner, Charles found himself asking questions he'd never thought to ask anyone before. He learned that Marcus's favorite subject was actually chemistry, not just science in general. The boy was fascinated by how different elements combine to create new substances, and he could explain complex chemical reactions in simple terms. "I think chemistry is like life," Marcus said thoughtfully. "You take different things that might not seem like they go together, but if you combine them the right way, you can create something completely new and useful." Charles was struck by the insight. Here was a 14-year-old who understood concepts that many business leaders never grasped. Linda shared stories about Marcus's father, describing him as a man who believed in hard work and helping others. Robert always said that a person's worth isn't measured by what they have, but by what they do for other people, she said. "I try to teach Marcus the same thing." Charles thought about his own father's lessons, how to negotiate, how to win, how to accumulate wealth and power. When had he last thought about helping others as a measure of success? After dinner, Marcus asked if he could see Charles's home office. He was amazed by the awards on the walls, the view of the city, and the rows of business books on the shelves. "Do you like what you do?" Marcus asked, studying a photo of Charles shaking hands with the mayor. The question surprised Charles. Yes, I suppose I do. I've always been good at business." "But do you like it?" Marcus pressed gently. Does it make you excited to get up in the morning?" Charles realized he hadn't thought about work in terms of excitement or passion in years. "What makes you excited to get up in the morning?" he asked instead. "Learning new things," Marcus said immediately. "Every day I learn something I didn't know before. And helping people. Like when I tutor kids at the community center, and suddenly they understand something they were struggling with. That feeling is amazing." Charles envied the simplicity and purity of Marcus's motivation. When had he last felt that kind of joy and accomplishment? As the evening continued, Charles began to understand something profound. He had spent decades building wealth and status, but Marcus, with almost nothing in material terms, possessed something Charles had lost along the way: purpose, joy, and genuine connection with others. When Linda and Marcus prepared to leave, Charles walked them to the door. "Thank you," he said, and for the first time, he wasn't thanking them for saving Victoria and James. He was thanking them for reminding him what really mattered. "Would it be okay if we did this again sometime?" he asked. Linda smiled. "We'd like that very much, Mr. Hartwell." After they left, Victoria found Charles sitting quietly in his office thinking. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Confused," Charles admitted. "I thought I was inviting them here to help them, but I think they helped me more." "How so?" Charles struggled to put his feelings into words. "I've spent my whole life accumulating things: money, property, status. I thought that was success. But Marcus has something I've never had and can't buy." "What's that?" "Peace with himself. Clarity about what matters. Joy in simple things." Charles paused, looking out at his manicured lawn and thinking about Marcus's small apartment. "I have everything I thought I wanted, but I don't think I'm as happy as that 14-year-old kid." Victoria nodded knowingly. "So what are you going to do about it?" Charles didn't have an answer yet, but he knew his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. Marcus Williams had saved more than Victoria and James in that car. He was beginning to save Charles from a life of meaningless accumulation and show him what it meant to truly live. Over the next 2 months, something unexpected happened in the Hartwell household. What had started as Sunday dinners became regular visits. Marcus would stop by after school sometimes to help Victoria with baby James, and Charles found himself looking forward to these conversations more than any business meeting. Marcus had a way of asking questions that made Charles think differently about everything. During one visit, Marcus noticed Charles seemed stressed about a business deal. "What's bothering you, Mr. Hartwell?" Marcus asked while gently rocking baby James. Charles explained that he was trying to decide whether to buy a small manufacturing company that was struggling financially. "I could get it for a good price, but I'd have to lay off half the workers to make it profitable." "What would happen to those workers?" Marcus asked. "They'd find other jobs eventually," Charles said. But even as he said it, he realized how callous it sounded. "My dad lost his job twice before the construction work," Marcus said quietly. "Each time it took months to find something else. We almost lost our apartment once. It's really scary when you don't know how you're going to pay for basic things." Charles had never considered the human cost of his business decisions in such personal terms. "What do you think I should do?" "I don't know much about business," Marcus admitted. "But maybe there's a way to help the company succeed without hurting the workers? Like, what if you made it better instead of smaller?" The conversation stayed with Charles all week. Instead of pursuing the acquisition, he decided to investigate whether the struggling company could be turned around through investment rather than downsizing. It was riskier financially, but it felt right in a way that business decisions never had before. Meanwhile, Charles began to see ways he could genuinely help Marcus and Linda without making them uncomfortable. When he learned that Marcus was struggling to get to his tutoring sessions at the community center because of bus schedule conflicts, Charles offered to have his driver pick Marcus up. Linda was hesitant until Charles explained that the driver was going in that direction anyway. Charles also discovered that Marcus's school had an outdated science lab that hindered students' learning. Instead of making a grand gesture, Charles quietly donated new equipment through an anonymous foundation. He made sure Marcus never knew the donation came from him. The most significant change came when Charles started volunteering at the community center where Marcus taught reading. At first he felt completely out of place. The other volunteers were teachers, retired social workers, and community members who had grown up in the neighborhood. Charles was the only person wearing a suit. "Just be yourself," Marcus advised when Charles admitted feeling awkward. "The kids don't care about your clothes. They just want someone who listens to them." Charles's first tutoring session was with 8-year-old Jamal, who was struggling with basic reading skills. Charles approached it like a business problem, trying to create efficient systems and measurable goals. It was a disaster. Jamal became frustrated and shut down completely. Marcus gently intervened, showing Charles how to make reading fun instead of stressful. "You don't have to solve everything," Marcus explained. "Sometimes you just have to be patient and let things happen naturally." Over several weeks, Charles learned to relax and connect with the children. He discovered that Jamal loved stories about space exploration, so Charles found books about astronauts and planets. Soon, Jamal was excited about reading because it opened up worlds he wanted to explore. The experience changed Charles profoundly. For the first time in decades, he was doing something without any expectation of financial return. The only reward was seeing a child's face light up when they successfully read a difficult sentence. Victoria noticed the change in her husband immediately. "You seem different," she said one evening as they watched Charles play with baby James. "Calmer, happier." "I think I'm remembering why I used to enjoy learning," Charles replied. "When I was young, before everything became about money and competition, I loved discovering new things. Being around Marcus and these kids reminds me of that feeling." The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Some of Charles's business associates were puzzled by his new priorities. When he turned down a profitable but environmentally questionable development project, his partner asked if he was having some kind of midlife crisis. "Maybe I am," Charles said, "but maybe that's not a bad thing." The real test came when Marcus faced a crisis of his own. Linda had been working extra hours to save money for Marcus's college applications, but an unexpected medical emergency ate up their savings. Linda needed minor surgery, and even with insurance, the costs were overwhelming. Marcus came to Charles and Victoria's house visibly upset. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "Mom says we might have to move to a cheaper place, and I might need to get a full-time job instead of finishing high school." Charles's instinct was to immediately write a check to cover all their expenses. But he remembered Victoria's advice about building relationships rather than solving problems with money. "Let me think about this," Charles said. "There might be some solutions we haven't considered." Over the next few days, Charles worked harder than he had on any business deal. He researched scholarship programs, contacted medical payment plan options, and spoke with the principal at Marcus's school about work-study opportunities. Instead of simply giving money, he helped Linda navigate systems she didn't know existed. He also did something more subtle. Charles quietly hired Linda's cleaning service for his office building, giving her steady work that paid better than her previous jobs. When she thanked him, he honestly said, "You're doing me a favor. I needed a reliable cleaning service, and I trust your work." The solution wasn't perfect or immediate, but it allowed Marcus to stay in school while helping his family financially. More importantly, it preserved Linda's dignity and Marcus's sense of responsibility. During this process, Charles realized something important. He had spent his entire adult life believing that success meant accumulating wealth and power, but watching Marcus maintain his grades, help his mother, tutor other children, and still find time to care about others, Charles understood a different definition of success. "I want to be more like Marcus when I grow up," Charles told Victoria one evening. Only half joking. What do you mean? She asked. He knows who he is and what matters to him. He doesn't let circumstances change his values. I'm 52 years old and I'm just learning what that 14-year-old already understands. Victoria smiled, watching Charles hold their son. It's not too late to learn, and James will be lucky to have a father who's figured that out. Charles looked down at baby James and made a silent promise. His son would grow up understanding that wealth was a responsibility, not just a privilege. He would know the value of helping others, of working hard for something meaningful, and of treating everyone with respect regardless of their circumstances. Marcus Williams had saved more than 2 lives that morning on Riverside Avenue. He had saved a family from losing their way entirely, and he had helped a successful but lost man find his purpose again. 1 year later, Charles Hartwell stood in the auditorium of Washington Middle School, wearing a simple polo shirt instead of his usual business suit. He was there to watch Marcus receive the Outstanding Student of the Year award, but his presence meant something much deeper than showing support for a young friend. Marcus walked across the stage with quiet confidence, accepting the award from the principal. As he spoke to the audience, Charles marveled at the poise and wisdom in someone so young. This award isn't just about grades, Marcus said into the microphone. It's about learning that we're all connected. When we help each other, we make everyone stronger. I've learned this year that kindness creates more kindness, and that's how we build a better community. In the audience, Charles felt tears in his eyes. Beside him, Victoria held baby James, who was now walking and babbling constantly. Linda Williams sat on Charles's other side, wearing a new dress that she had bought with money from her steady job at Hartwell Industries. After the ceremony, the 2 families gathered for a celebration dinner at the same restaurant where Charles used to hold business meetings. But tonight there were no deals being made, no profits being calculated. Tonight was about celebrating a remarkable young man and the journey they had all taken together. I have some news, Marcus announced as they waited for dessert. I got the scholarship to the summer science program at the university. Charles felt his heart swell with pride. He had quietly made some calls to ensure Marcus knew about the scholarship opportunity, but the boy had earned it entirely on his own merit. That's wonderful. Marcus, Victoria said, bouncing James on her lap. You've worked so hard for this. Linda wiped away tears of joy. Your father would be so proud, she told her son. Charles cleared his throat, feeling emotional. Marcus, do you remember that day in the car when Victoria asked you why you were helping her? Yes, sir. You said it was because she needed help, and that's what people do for each other. You were right, and you taught me something I had forgotten. Charles paused, gathering his thoughts. I spent most of my life thinking that success meant having more than everyone else. But this year, you've shown me that real success means making sure everyone has enough. Charles reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. This isn't a gift, he said carefully. It's an investment in our community's future. It's a full scholarship for your college education, with one condition. Marcus and Linda looked at the envelope in shock. Mr. Hartwell, we can't accept, Linda began. The condition, Charles continued, is that after you become a doctor, you spend at least 2 years providing medical care in underserved communities. Communities like the one where you grew up. Marcus stared at the envelope, his eyes filling with tears. You really believe I can do it? Become a doctor? Marcus, Charles said firmly, you're going to be an amazing doctor. But more than that, you're going to be the kind of doctor who remembers where he came from and uses his success to lift others up. The celebration was interrupted when baby James suddenly said his first clear word. Marcus. Everyone at the table burst into laughter and tears simultaneously. Even James knows who the real hero is, Victoria said, kissing her son's forehead. Later that evening, as the families prepared to part ways, Marcus approached Charles privately. Mr. Hartwell, can I ask you something? Of course. That day when I found Mrs. Hartwell, were you angry that it was me who helped her? Because I'm... Marcus hesitated, then continued. Because I'm different from your family? Charles felt his heart break a little. He knelt down to Marcus's eye level, something he never would have thought to do a year ago. Marcus, I'm going to tell you something I've never admitted to anyone. That day when I first saw you in the hospital, I was uncomfortable. Not angry, but uncomfortable. And do you know why? Marcus shook his head. Because you made me realize how wrong I had been about so many things. You challenged every assumption I had about people, about what matters, about how to live a good life. And yes, that made me uncomfortable because it meant I had to change. Charles stood up, putting his hand on Marcus's shoulder. But you know what? Changing was the best thing that ever happened to me. You didn't just save Victoria and James that day. You saved me from becoming someone I wouldn't have been proud of. Marcus smiled, the worry leaving his face. Thank you for telling me that, sir. And thank you for becoming my friend. Thank you for teaching me what friendship really means. 6 months later, Charles made another significant change. He established the Marcus Williams Foundation, dedicated to providing educational opportunities and mentorship for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. But instead of simply funding it from his corporate profits, Charles restructured several of his business practices to create sustainable, community-benefiting enterprises. The Foundation's first initiative was expanding the tutoring program at the community center, where Charles still volunteered every Tuesday evening. He had become known among the children not as the rich businessman, but as Mr. Charles who reads really good scary stories. Marcus continued to excel academically while maintaining his part-time job and volunteer work. He had grown taller and more confident, but he remained the same kind, thoughtful person who had stopped to help a stranger in distress. On a warm spring evening, 2 years after that first encounter, both families gathered in Charles and Victoria's backyard for a barbecue. Charles was pushing 2-year-old James on a swing set, while Marcus helped Linda prepare salad at the picnic table. Victoria watched the scene with deep contentment. "Do you remember when you were worried about what to talk about with them?" she asked Charles. "Now I can't imagine not having them in our lives," Charles replied, catching James at the bottom of the slide. "Marcus asks better questions than most of my board members, and gives better advice," Victoria added. As the sun set, Marcus sat on the grass with young James, reading him a picture book about a little boy who wanted to help everyone in his neighborhood. James listened intently, occasionally pointing at pictures and trying to repeat words. "Book," James said excitedly, his vocabulary growing daily. "That's right, James. Books help us learn about the world," Marcus said patiently. Charles watched this interaction and thought about the chain reaction that had started with one act of kindness on a street corner. Marcus's compassion had saved his family's lives, but it had also created something much larger, a new understanding of what it meant to truly live. That evening, as the Williams family prepared to leave, Linda hugged Victoria goodbye. "Thank you," Linda whispered. "For what?" "For seeing who Marcus really is. For treating us like family." "Thank you for sharing him with us," Victoria replied. "He's made us better people." As Charles watched the Williams family walk to their car, the reliable used car he had helped Linda purchase through a fair payment plan, he realized that the scared, prejudiced man he had been 2 years ago felt like a stranger to him now. Marcus waved goodbye from the car window, and Charles waved back, knowing that this remarkable young man would continue to change lives wherever he went. Marcus Williams had taught him that heroism wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It was about showing up, caring about others, and believing that everyone deserved dignity and opportunity. The boy who had saved a millionaire's family had, in turn, saved the millionaire's soul. And in doing so, he had created a ripple effect of kindness that would continue long after he became the doctor he dreamed of being. Some rescues happen in moments. Others take a lifetime. Marcus Williams had managed to accomplish both.